And welcome back. You're still tuned into Sakisi's We're Building the Nation Podinasi, and that is the sounds by DJ Zintle called Mlilo, which brings us into our first interview for today. So come engage with us via WhatsApp on 061 862 1065. And right now we will be going into our first interview with advocate Sabelo Sibanda, known as the People's Law Activist and the founder of the International Alliance of Law Activists. So today we touch on a critical discussion, an issue that could fundamentally reshape the scene of public education in South Africa. And like I said, I am joined by advocate Sabelo Sibanda, known as the People Law Activist and the founder of the International Alliance of Law Activists, to discuss the proposed admission of learners to public school regulations per the notice 3415 of 2025. So the proposed regulations introduce significant new conditions for school entry, including mandatory proof of immunization, and they've also sparked intense debates about parental rights, children access to education, and constitutional freedoms. So with the public comment deadline rapidly approaching on September the 5th, parents, educators, and citizens have mere days left to make their voices heard on regulations that could affect every family in South Africa. So good afternoon. How are we today, firstly, Sabelo?
Hi, Jasmine. I'm really good, thank you. How are you doing?
Can't complain at all. So firstly, let's just start by, if you can maybe just take us through what these regulations basically mean for an ordinary individual.
Well, basically what the regulations mean, mainly for the children and their parents, is that children cannot be admitted to school till such time that they can produce proof that they have been vaccinated in as far as the conditions that the minister has identified as the medical conditions that need to be vaccinated on. So it means parents have a responsibility, therefore, to make sure that their children get these vaccinations and then produce this at the school to ensure that their children can get access to education.
But what about the children that's already enrolled in school?
Well, there is no clarity as to what exactly that means for them going forward, but if what we are to understand is that the necessity for the vaccinations is to protect children, it necessarily means they will also be impacted somewhere along the line. We might have this as an entry into the jabbing of every child, and also the introduction of further vaccines which we do not know of.
Definitely. And these proposed regulations require, like you've mentioned, it requires proof to show that your child has been vaccinated and so forth to get admission to school. And currently it's only affecting newcomers, enrollment process basically.
Yeah.
But how do we view this requirement in the viewpoints of South Africa's constitution? Because firstly, our constitution says that you have the right to basic education. And now I'm being forced to take my child to get my child vaccinated, and a lot of parents don't believe in certain vaccines,
Yeah.
for instance, particularly regarding the parents' rights when it comes to that and the best interest of the child's principle in order to get the child enrolled. So if we can just have your views around what the constitution states around that. Is that meaning that we are not taking the constitution in account? Because firstly, as a South African citizen, you can't be denied from access to education.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the questions that you pose are the questions that a lot of us are posing to the minister, because, as you correctly say, Section 29 of the Constitution makes access to education unconditional. Whereas what the minister is now coming up with is basically to say, regardless of what the Constitution says, I'm now imposing a condition which will therefore determine whether your child has access to education or not. So clearly, looked at simply from that perspective, it is not applicable in as far as a law that can stand were challenged constitutionally. And at the same time, what the minister is doing, the schools, South African Schools Act, gives the minister the power to ensure that children can access education. But now the minister is coming up with regulations which seek to ensure that children now have conditional acceptance to education. And further, what this
But
means,
is this not also, sorry to interrupt
No,
you
no
there,
problem.
but does this not also, or rather, is this not also the reason why the Bella Bill was basically imposed, to make provision for this? Because there was also a time frame for public participation on that, for people to have their say, and at the end of the day it comes down to the governing body. They actually also have a say, and government has a say in the way forward for your children, for instance. So in that regard, is there any provision made to protect the child still to be able to stand up for their rights in this case? Regarding the Bella Bill, can't you also have access or encounter the student body basically?
well, the thing is, you see, in as far as this particular one on access to education, what the government is seeking to do is create the impression that yes, the children can stand up and use an application for exemption process, which then exempts them from having to take this jab but still be able to get into school. But the thing about this exemption route that is being proposed is that it is under the authority of the HOD, the head of Department of Education, who now has to take a decision based on whether the child's application is founded on medical grounds, cultural grounds, or religious grounds. How can this person, man or woman, be so skilled and be an expert in education, in health, in culture, in religion? We saw this script during the days of the so-called COVID, where people were told, yeah, you have to take it, it's mandatory, but at the same time, you can apply for exemption. And what were the grounds? Medical, cultural, and religious.
Yes.
But how many people did get those exemptions? And who was taking the decisions? Doctors and people who are not familiar with everyone's culture or familiar with everyone's religion, but they were the ones who were taking the decisions. And we are seeing it here again. How do you get a child to apply for exemption, and the motivation for that exemption is supported by a medically certified doctor with the Health Professional Council of South Africa? But the person who has to take a decision on what a doctor has said is not a doctor themselves. And at the same time, why is it just doctors and not naturopaths? Why is it not traditional healers who can also motivate for exemption? Why are we all being pushed into a corner where we now have to go with allopathic medicine? Why should we go and buy the medicine from the pharmaceutical companies whilst we can have the herbs and the leaves that God gave us that we can use? Why should we be put into that corner? So now the way for the children and the parents to fight for themselves is basically to look at it in terms of the law and use the law. Because even if you look at it from the perspective of the National Health Act, the National Health Act in Section 6 is very, very clear that government, in giving authority to health practitioners, it has restricted their ability in as far as medical intervention on people is concerned without informed consent, which also is standing on Section 12 of the Constitution, whereby informed consent basically entails the necessity for a person to be told on the benefits of what they are taking, the risks of what they are taking, the ingredients of what they are taking, and also be told if there are alternatives that are available and the cost factor. But in this particular instance, I'm not aware of any parent who has been informed of the ingredients of what is in these things, and any parent who has actually been given informed consent in the manner that the Act desires it to be. Actually, on my way here this morning, a parent phoned me and said his daughter was injected just a week or so ago. And when we started this awareness raising on parents having to comment, a parent phoned me from Kailicha as well, saying his daughter was vaccinated. And you now start to wonder what this whole thing is really about and what the consent that is being asked for is really speaking to. I'm actually waiting for some of the parents to give me the consent form that the schools are using to go through this particular process so that we can test it in lines of the Constitution, the Schools Act, and also the National Health Act. And as much as that, we're also looking at the HPCSA and what it has to say in as far as informed consent is concerned.
Definitely. And also, like, this hasn't been implemented, it's not forced yet upon people, and that is why the public comments period basically ends on the 5th of September.
Yes.
So technically that children, those parents' children that got injected, they didn't need to go through that process because it's not enforced yet. So giving citizens very limited time to respond to regulations that could affect the everyday family. This time frame or timeline adequate for meaningful public participation, like you just stated now clearly. Like, what does this say about our democratic process? Firstly, like, how can people advocate, and especially if you're not familiar with your human rights, firstly, because there's a lot of people that don't actually know their basic human rights.
Yeah, true.
And so they don't know how to defend themselves, and like you say, you need to be able to argue your case why your child is not going to take that vaccination. And like you say, it's left upon doctors to decide, but what about other traditional healers and so forth? They don't get acknowledged in this case.
No, absolutely. And that is one of the biggest dangers. And you see, you touch on a very critical point, Jasmine, as regards the public participation. You know that this particular regulation that the minister has put out is only circulated in English, none of the other languages. So it means for people who belong to the different language groups, there is no communication with them. Yet these are the people who will be expected to subject their children to the outcomes of these regulations. So now where is the participation? Where there are blind people who have children, it has not been circulated in Braille. There are people who communicate in sign language. Where are they in this whole process? All the other languages, the Khoi and the San languages, where are they? So does it mean, therefore, that all these people who have not been communicated with are exempt because they haven't been told, they haven't been given an opportunity to say what they think? So the first time that they will know that this has happened is when now they are deemed to be in violation of the law, and they are standing in court and someone is reading out and saying, yeah, this is what you did. But the poor parent didn't have a clue. How about those parents who unfortunately never went to school? Even if you were to communicate in writing in the language that they speak, they won't relate to it. And even if it's written in English, it's written in such a language that some people who speak English cannot relate to that language either. It's not even correct to say it's in English. It's in legalese.
So in this case, can you also like use pencil basically as a party, because they basically cater for language barriers. When it comes to language barriers, they advocate for people like everything needs to be in the 12
Yeah,
we
it
have
was
12.
officially
We have
11,
12.
but now with
Yes,
sign
12
language, it's
official
12
languages.
now. Yeah,
So
right.
they make provision that everything is basically written in the 12 official languages.
Mm-hmm.
So can you basically argue that you can also bring them on board in order to justify why this can't be implemented? Firstly, because clearly it's like you say, it's just in isiXhosa and in English.
No, it's just in English. English only,
Now
no
there we
other
go.
language. It's just in English. And I love your thinking around pen slap. I must confess, I'd never thought of pen slap as being an issue in all this. Yes, they are an issue. And it will be necessary to have a conversation. Actually, after this, I'll reach out to them. Thank you for dropping that
Not
point.
a problem at all. So just also, since we are moving in that deadline and it's just a week.
It's just over a week now.
I think it's yes, it is a week and a few days left in order for people to stop this. And this is why it is important for us to have this conversation so that more parents can come forth. So as the founder of the International Alliance of Lawctivists, like you work across various borders, like how do similar regulations, well, I think we're going to park that question for now. We just need to go into the isiXhosa news at 1 o'clock because I'm not going to have time for you to give me your answer on that one. So do keep it locked to Bush Radio 89.5 FM. We're just going to go into the isiXhosa headlines or news with Ilona Sipunzi. And then after that, we'll proceed with our discussion. So do keep it locked to Bush Radio 89.5 FM.
According to the UN, the prevalence of child marriage is declining around the world.
Do we need to
But
leave?
in parts of Africa, it's actually becoming a bigger problem.
South Africa has some of the worst cases of gender-based violence against women and children in the world. Many women and girls are murdered at the hands of their partners.
Uganda's parliament has passed a bill which would criminalise people who identify as LGBTQ.
A landmark verdict in India. The country's apex court, the Supreme Court, has overturned a 157-year-old law that criminalized homosexuality.
South African women still face a myriad of challenges such as gender-based violence, sexual harassment in the workplace, unemployment, and unequal
Is
pay.
it about the taxis? Yes. And what else?
Join us on Saki Season, Building the Nation, Gauri Nasi, as we break down constructs of gender and sexuality around the world and in South Africa every Wednesday from 12 up until 2 on Bush Radio 89.5 FM.
Yes, Windy the first one.
Weinberg, Music and Observatory. This is 89.5 FM.
Ndiyabudisa kuwe mphulaphuli. Isabelo Sibanda inkomfa ye-Interpol. Urhulumente wentshona koloni uyagxeka ubundlobongela obuqhubekayo beeteksi kwaye abarhanelwa baza kuvela enkundleni ngelokuzama ukubulala. Inkonzo yamapolisa oMzantsi Afrika isingathe inkomfa yama-27 ye-Interpol Africa eKapa namhlanje phantsi kobunkokheli obubambeleyo bomphathiswa wamapolisa uFeroz Kachalia. uKachalia uza kube ekunye nosekela baphathiswa uPolly Bushiyelo kunye noCastle Mathale ukusingatha le nkomfa kwiziko lenkomfa laseCentury City kude kube ngolwesihlanu wale veki. Ngokwengxelo umongameli we-Interpol Ahmed Nasser Al-Raisi uza kuzimasa kule nkomfa ekunye nomkomishinala wenkonzo yesipolisa kuzwelonke uFani Masemula kwakunye nabaphathi bamapolisa abohlukeneyo. Isithethi seSAPS uAthlenda Mathe uthi le ndibano igxininisa ukuzibophelela boMzantsi Afrika ekulweni ulwaphulo-mthetho olujoliswe kumazwe ngamazwe. uMathe uthe le nkomfa ilindeleke ukuba impendulo zengeni ngeli xesha isebenzisa njengeqonga ezilungileyo kunye nentsebenziswano yokuthotyelwa komthetho. Urhulumente wentshona koloni uthi udushe luqhubekayo olunxulumene neeteksi kweli phondo lubeka ubomi babakhweli emngciphekweni. Kudutyulwe kwabhubha abantu abathandathu kwiziganeko ezahlukeneyo eKapa ukusukela ngeCawe. Abanye abantu bashiyeke bengamaxhoba okukulandela ubambeka kuqhushululu lokudubulana. Urhulumente wephondo uthi ngoku uthatha amanyathelo okubuyisela ucwangco nokukhusela ubomi babantu. Inkulumbuso Allen Windi uligxekile.
That we bring law and order. We've just held a recent taxi. All of those discussions have come to naught. We cannot allow violence to be a mechanism to deal with competition. Violence will never ever be condoned, and we need to make sure that these associations come to the table, and we need calm. We've got to make sure that our residents are able to use the transport systems. Nothing can be justified through bloodshed.
Kusenjalo ikomiti ezisigxina zentshona koloni ezijongene nokubeka iliso kumapolisa kunye nokhuseleko loluntu kunye nokuhamba ithi ijonge ukumema umphathiswa wezokuhamba entshona koloni, umkomishinala wamapolisa wesizwe kunye nomkomishinala wamapolisa ephondo lentshona koloni ukuba baxoxe ngongenelelo olukhawulezileyo olulungenalisiweyo ukuzinza le meko.
Ikomiti ye-mobility which is ezothutho kunye komiti ye-safety yalapha entshona koloni kuze kuxoxwe malunga nalo mcimbi. Ukhuseleko lwabantu kufuneka lube yeyona nto iphambili. Singakwazi ukuhlala nje sithule kukubi phandle apha.
Namhlanje abarhanelwa abahlanu ababanjiweyo malunga nobuqhophololo kuFacebook balindeleke ukuba bavele kwinkundla kaMantyi yaseMidrand. Babanjwe ekuqaleni kwale veki ngelixa bezama ukuqhatha imali kumntu ophendule kwintengiso yemoto kuFacebook Marketplace ngokwengxelo lomntu ebeza kuthenga utheleke namapolisa njengesilumkiso kwindawo ekulindeleke ukuba yenzeke kuyo le ntengiselwano. Eli qela ladubula lakubona la mapolisa, nto leyo eyaphumela kukudubulana. Amadoda aneminyaka ephakathi kwama-27 ukuya kuma-39 enzakele ngethuba lokudubulana namapolisa aze azama ukubaleka ngeemoto ezimbini. Emva kokuleqa kwaza kwabhukuqa enye yeemoto kwabanje abarhanela abahlanu kwafunyanwa imipu emibini kubo. Eli qela lijongene nezityholo zokuzama ukubulala, ukuba nemipu ngaphandle kwephepha-mvume, imbumbulu kunye nelokwenza iyelekenqe lokuphanga kuxhotyiwe. Amapolisa asaqhubeka nokukhangela abanye abarhanelwa ababini abathe bakwazile ukuqhwesha ngethuba lokudubula. Kwezangaphandle, iEurope ifumene eyona mililo yasendle imbi kulo nyaka. I-European Union ithi lo mlilo utshise umhlaba ongaphezu kwesigidi sehektare ukuza kuthi ga ngoku kulo nyaka. Oku kungaphezu kwawo nawuphi na unyaka ukususela oko kwagcinwa irekhodi zedatha ezisemthethweni ngo-2006. iSpain kunye nePortugal ibingawona amazwe ebechaphazeleke kakhulu ukuza kuthi ga ngoku kulo nyaka. Kusavutha amadlelo alishumi eSpain ngelixa iPortugal iwucimile umlilo wayo wamva nje ngomvulo. I-EU ithi ukutshintsha kwemozulu kwenza imililo yasendle ixhaphake. Sigqibelise ngezemidlalo. iKaizer Chiefs izawudlala namhlanje neMamelodi Sundowns. iMamelodi izawugqibisana neKaizer Chiefs kumdlalo olandelayo we-Absa Premiership eFNB Stadium ngokuhloka namhlanje. Mpulaphuli kukangaka ebendiniphathele kona namhlanje kwiindaba zesiXhosa. Iingongoma zelandela ngecala emva kwale yure kwiindaba zesiXhosa eBush Radio. Ndingu-Elona Sibunzi.
For more news, log on to www.bushradionews.blogspot.com.
Bush Radio, 89.5 FM.
I almost read that in English.
Weinberg Music and Observatory. This is 89.5 FM.
It's all good for your community announcements.
I should be back
Welcome to the
before
Community
that, but if I'm
Information
not, you play
Network,
the
and
song.
these are your upcoming events. Obaitori, a Japanese word that reminds us not to compare ourselves to others. And that's exactly how the South African Guide Dogs Association see their incredible dogs. Four-legged friends trained to support someone with a disability.
walking alongside them with loyalty, love and purpose. Join the Association for Obaitori, a spring festival and photo exhibition, a relaxed, family-friendly afternoon filled with joy, connection and community on Saturday, the 30th of August at the Palm, situated on Salari Road in Woodstock. Tickets are 150 Rand on Quicket, and all proceeds go towards supporting the training and placement of guide dogs in South Africa. Expect a food market, arts and crafts, and so much more. For more information, WhatsApp the association on 068 465 1406. Join Munib Herman's Big Band on Sunday, the 31st of August, as they pay homage to the traditional big band sound and fuses the repertoire with his own originals and also classic arrangements of music made famous in South Africa. The 20-piece big band consists of top session musicians in Cape Town. The event starts at 4 p.m. and is being held at the Guga Stebe Cultural Center, situated on Washington Street in Langa. Tickets cost 150 Rand on Quicket and 200 Rand at the door. And if you'd like Bush Radio to broadcast your event or community upliftment project, then send us a message on WhatsApp on 061 862 1065. Alternatively, drop us a mail on news@bushradio.co.za with the subject Event.
Bush Radio offers you the opportunity to broadcast your community notice
to 862-1065. Alternatively, drop us a mail on news@bushradio.co.za with the subject Event.
Bush Radio.
I'm going to ask it again.
Broadcast your community notices during our community notice board slot. All you have to do is submit a paragraph detailing your event or community upliftment project, and we will broadcast it free of charge. Email your information to news@bushradio.co.za. Bush Radio, the voice of the community.
And welcome back. You still tune in to Sakisi's We're Building the Nation, Podinasi, and thank you very much to Ilona Sibunzi for the isiXhosa news at 1 o'clock. So we are speaking to Advocate Sabelo Sibanda, known as the People's Law Activist and the founder of the International Alliance of Law Activists. And today we are discussing the proposed admission of learners to public school regulations. So that basically comes down to mandatory proof of immunization. And as we've been talking about this, and you've basically also highlighted that schools are gonna actually demand proof from parents to see if their child has been vaccinated and so forth. But I want to know, as the founder of the International Alliance of Law Activists, you basically work across borders. Like, how do similar regulations in other countries align with international human rights laws? And what lessons can South Africa basically learn from that? Because I will always say we are very fortunate here in South Africa to have such a strong constitution, but now the constitution is basically contradicting what is written in the constitution, which comes down to when it's beneficial to our government, then they basically divert to the constitution, and when it's not in their best interest, then it's like we're not gonna acknowledge what it basically says in the constitution. So where does that basically leave the citizens of South Africa?
No, that's a very important question, because maybe let me just also correct, it's Lawctivist.
Oh, is it
not
Lawctivist?
Law activist? No, it's Lawctivist. It's a combination of law and activism, so it just becomes one word, Lawctivism. I coined it because I'm a lawyer and I'm also an activist, so I just call myself a Lawctivist.
Thank you very much for the clarity on that.
Not a problem. So now, as regards the comparative aspect as to what's happening locally and what's happening in other countries as well. Last night we had a session where we were having a similar talk with the community out in Somerset West. And we had a guest from the United States who participated on that particular session. He says that in the US, the children actually get close to 100 vaccines. Whereas here we're still stuck at 6 that we are fighting with, because the minister has proposed 6. But then now I've heard about children being vaccinated for HPV and stuff, which doesn't make sense to me, because that only HPV is supposed to affect people who are promiscuous and have multiple sex partners. So how that affects a primary school child, I really do not know, and it doesn't make any sense to me. So, in talking to colleagues in Europe as well, they're grappling with the same thing. What is basically happening here is that there is a global agenda, which is under the World Health Organization, to push health regulations into every country, so that these health regulations along the way align to the international health regulations. So it makes it easier for the enforceability of the international when the local is already in line. So the idea is to get all the locals along the line that will now fit into the international health regulations. So we are not an isolated case, but like you say, the beautiful thing about South Africa is that we have a strong constitution, but the constitution is only as strong as the people using it. So if it's just written, and you're absolutely correct that government, where it suits their interests, will run to the constitution and find the provisions within the constitution that address that particular program that they want to run with. But now, where they're doing something that is in violation of the constitution, they don't talk about the constitution at all, just like what's happening now.
But is that not why we do have sectors in place to hold accountability firstly? Like the South African Human Rights Commission, for instance, that's able to challenge government when it comes to them contradicting what it basically says in black and white in the constitution. And then we do also have the equal education sector, as well as equal law, equal commission as well, to be able to advocate for people that don't actually know what the rights basically mean. Is that not why these sectors have been put in place, to keep government accountable?
That's what they're supposed to do, including the Public Protector's Office. But you see, the general tendency of these particular sectors you're talking to is that they don't do anything until someone comes up to them and complains about it. So if you've got a citizenry that has been made to be ignorant deliberately, that citizenry is not going to approach these entities that are supposed to protect them. And let's look at the COVID scenario, for instance, where I honestly do not remember any of these entities rising up in defense of the people. And now to expect them of their own accord to get up and defend. If they did say something, I must have missed it, but it would mean it was never publicized. Maybe they did. I'm not going to argue and say I've been following everything that they do.
And I also can't stand for the other entities, but I know Equal Law did basically stand up because it is a sector that also advocates for the rights of children. So I know they were very vocal when it came to compulsory mandate for COVID vaccines, for instance.
No, that's excellent. That's an entity that we're hoping that even this time round, they will be vocal, they will stand up, they will join the public drive. Because you see, one of the reasons why I'm here today, thankfully invited me through, is so that we make the public aware. But some of these challenges, if they don't get publicized to the people so that the people understand their rights, they end up being office challenges without much of the public being part of that particular process. That is why in going around raising awareness like this, it's not simply for people to know, but it's to encourage people to actually get up and comment. It's to encourage people, even as we speak now, to request the minister for an extension of time, which extension of time will be informed by how soon the minister can communicate with everyone in a language that they understand. So the running of time has to start when everything is now in place. The imbizos are there for those people who are illiterate, and every other language that has been excluded has also been given an opportunity to have this communicated in their own language. We also have the Braille also made available for the blind people, so that they can also be communicated with in a language that they relate to and be able to respond as well in that same language, because that is what they know. And for now, all that is not there. So the minister has to take this back to the drawing board, and the minister has to address the inconsistencies within those same regulations. Because here we're talking about Section 14 of the regulations, which talks to the immunization. But Section 9 talks about the right not to be discriminated. But this Section 14 is saying, no, let's discriminate. We bring these ones into school and we stop those ones. And it's only for public schools, not for private schools. And then Section 10 guarantees the right to education. But this one is saying, if you don't take a jab, then... So which one do we apply? Because if you go with Section 9 and 10, then you are in violation of 14, because you are letting the children in without immunization. If you go with 14, you are in violation of 9 and 10, which say don't discriminate and don't block children from having access to education.
And that is why I say they're busy contradicting themselves, because the one right falls on top of the other right.
Absolutely.
And that is why it is important for our citizens to at least know the 15 basic human rights. I think there is 27 in total, if I'm correct. Don't keep me to that number, but at least know the 15 most common
the Bill of Rights,
basic human rights, because the one basically laps on top of the other one. So it is important that you do know those, because that 15 rights intertwine with one another. So for parents and citizens concerned about these regulations, like what immediate steps can they take during this comment period? Like what legal remedies would you basically advise are available if the constitutional rights are violated, if they basically go forward with implementing this enforcement on citizens?
Well, basically for now, the way to go is to make sure that your comments get to the minister. There is a playlist on the People's Lawctivist YouTube channel. The playlist on the YouTube channel goes through this particular regulation process, including the commentary period. The third video particularly goes through the documents that will help the parents to be able to know what to address and what not to address. Because some people believe that public comments, it's enough to just get up and say, oh, I hate this government. Oh, I don't agree with these regulations. They'll throw those things away because you haven't really said anything. The idea is to comment on the regulations.
You must line it out.
You must line it out and say, now I'm talking to this particular issue, and now I'm talking to that issue. I'm talking to the heads of departments given so much power. I'm talking to the SGBs now being the enforcers, because Section 22 expects the school governing bodies to be the ones that ensure that this actually happens. That is outside the scope of the roles and responsibilities of SGBs. So the government cannot now want to enforce an unconstitutional procedure by getting the SGBs to come and support that. And somebody raised an interesting point yesterday, actually saying, if this is to be done to the children, let's have the teachers as well taking the jab. Let's have the members of parliament as well taking the jab. They should lead by example. And they might argue and say, yeah, but those are jabs that we took when we were, those are not the same thing that we took when we were young. And again, that's another topic for another day, where some people, in talking about these so-called jabs we had as children, those were brands. You brand, like you brand an animal. You can actually tell people as to where they come from depending on the brands that they were branded with when they were children.
And it's there up until adulthood.
Absolutely.
You can still
it
see
never goes away. The
still
brand
see the
is
box.
still there. Yeah. You belong to this one.
So thank you very much, Sibanda, for taking the time to speak to us today. So just in conclusion, are there any additional words that you would like to leave us with, and also how people can get in touch with you if they have further questions?
What I would basically encourage is that if you have to send correspondence to government, I generally encourage written correspondence, which is sent by registered mail or couriered, so you have evidence that this thing was actually sent, because it's proving to be more and more of a challenge to prove that emails were actually read. You can send me an email now, you've got it on your system that you sent it to me. If I turn around and say, no, I didn't see it, there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. So now we don't know how this process really goes. For instance, now when they were asking for comments on the constitutional review, I sent an email, I followed it up by WhatsApp, and they said they'll come back to me. And to this day, I've never received any acknowledgement that my email was actually received and what happened there. So that's why I'm now encouraging people, if you are in Pretoria, go to Pretoria, drop it off there and get a stamp to confirm that the document was dropped. And for those who want to...
But even with the emails, you do have the read notification to indicate that you have read it, because if that email gets open, it automatically sends you a notification that someone has read it.
But then it depends on the system. For instance, my system, I've got the red receipt thing on.
And it opens it by itself.
When you open, it gives you the option to accept that I should be informed. So a lot of people just do not accept. So you've had someone who's read it, they've got that red receipt, but they opt out of the confirmation. So that is where maybe some systems automatically do it, I'm not aware, but the one that I'm using gives people the option. So what I'll say is parents must understand the importance of informed consent, and they have to arm themselves with the law so that they know how to protect themselves. And for those who need to get in touch, I'm available on WhatsApp on 073 084 5415. And also you can tune into YouTube, the People's Lawctivist. That's the YouTube channel, where Lawctivist is LAWCTIVIST, the People's Lawctivist. And then you will get the information that speaks to this particular process. If you have to send an email, it's admin@lawctivismalliance.org. admin@lawctivismalliance.org. So you're very welcome to reach out, and we see how we can help consolidate democracy. This is not a fight against anyone or anything. If any parent out there is happy with what is going on and you want to support the regulations, again, that is your right. You can just indicate, yes, I love these regulations to bits. That is your right. But for a parent who has concerns with the regulations, it is your right as well to express that. And here, what we're doing is basically helping government. Because by right, I should be a government official helping to tell people that this is why they are right and this is what the regulations mean. But then, because government either does not have people to do that or no budget to do that, volunteers are doing it.
And this is why we have the right to freedom in South Africa.
Absolutely.
To not get forced into anything if we don't believe in what government basically puts out there. You have the right to basically stand up for that. And that is why, again, I say we are very fortunate here in South Africa to be so vocal and to have protection. Tell us, if you know how to use the Constitution.
Yeah.
You can go all the way. But if you don't know, because firstly, with all human rights, there is limitations. So
Yeah.
if you are not using your human right to inflict harm onto someone else,
Absolutely.
with all means, then you're able to stand up for yourself. But if you're using it for the wrong purpose, that is when the restriction basically arises. And yeah, we will basically see how all of this unfold. So thank you very much, Advocate Sibanda, for enlightening discussion on such a critical issue affecting every South African family. And you've basically highlighted the constitutional, practical, and also democratic magnitudes of these proposed school admission regulations. So for our listeners, the key takeaway is clear. Time is running out, and the public comment deadline is the 5th of September. And it is basically approaching us very fast, and this may be the last opportunity for parents, educators, and also citizens to influence regulations that could fundamentally change how children access education in South Africa. So at the end of the day, the question raised today goes beyond immunization requirements. They basically touch on the very heart of our constitutional democracy, and that is what we outlined in this interview. And it also comes down to parental rights and the principle that every child deserves access to education. So whether you support or oppose these regulations, your voice matters in the democratic process. And this is basically what Sibanda outlined, that if you agree with it, with all means, you say, I agree with whatever is written in there. And if you don't, you need to be very specific with what you don't agree in order for your voice to get heard. So if you want to reach out to Sibanda.
Yes, an A at the end, no problem.
Then simply all you do is contact him on WhatsApp. So that's 073 084 5415 073 084 5415.
Yes, ma'am.
Or send an email to admin at Lawctivism alliance.org. So that is the easiest way how to get in touch with him. And if you have missed the conversation, you can basically revert to our blog on Saki Sizwe's blog page, and this interview will be there as well. So with that, again, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right now we will be going into the Afrikaans headlines at 1:30 word Mitchum George. So do keep it locked to Bush Radio.